Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and in today's video we're deciphering the world of controllers for Star Citizen, helping some of you make your choice about how you fly your ships. As with all nerdy topics, there are loads of acronyms involved when it comes to flight controls, KBM, HOTAS, HOSAS, etc. And I know some people will feel a bit stupid asking what they mean, even though you really shouldn't. So I thought I'd put this video together as a bit of a quick guide to help folks out as they go through some of the pros and cons of each choice. If this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. Just before we get into the vid proper, I've been on something of a hiatus for the past month. I had a minor injury to my shoulder and neck that had been niggling me for a while, so like a true British guy, I did nothing about it. But then after lifting something that I really shouldn't have, namely a very squirmy Frenchie out of the car, something went pop and it turned into a major injury. Thankfully, it seems to be on the mend now, although I think I have just hit that age where you no longer bounce straight back from these things. I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who pinged me a message to check I was doing okay. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the most common control archetypes for SC. I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole of which brands to go for, because quite simply, I haven't got Linus Tech Tips money to go buying every piece of equipment and really putting it through its paces. However, I will offer my humble opinions, but do feel free to disagree with me in the comments. What I am primarily focused on here though is the different controller setups that you can choose from, to give people an idea of what their options are, acting as something of a launchpad for you to conduct further research on what might be right for you. I do just want to acknowledge from the start though that you can go down a pricey money pit expanding your rig, and you should never feel pressured to buy something that's beyond your budget. As we'll see from choice number 1, you can enjoy SC with a $45 starter pack and a keyboard and mouse setup just fine. One thing I will say though is that if, as many Star Citizen enjoyers do, you start scrolling down the pledge store looking at pricier ships than an Aurora or a Mustang, you might want to stop and think about using that money for your rig instead. Your rig is universal, so if you enhance your control setup, you get to use that on every ship that you fly, and in many cases for games beyond Star Citizen. Whereas if you upgrade your starter pack to a Cutty Black, you only get the benefit of that one ship in this one game. So before we start talking about individual setups, I think it's worth a little detour to understand 6 degrees of freedom, or 6DOF as it's sometimes shortened to. This whole topic has just so much jargon. When you're flying spaceships, this can prove to be a distinctive issue versus traditional flight simulator setups though. To start with, your ship can move along 3 axes. It can go forward and back along the x-axis, left and right along the y-axis, and up and down along the z-axis. That's the z-axis for my American friends. This is what's referred to as the Cartesian plane. But then the ship can also roll on the x-axis, pitch forward and back around the y-axis, and yaw left and right around the z-axis. These are therefore your 6 movements, or your 6 degrees of freedom. And some control setups are better than others at giving you enough inputs to pull off movements along all of these. So without further ado, let's kick things off with Old Faithful, keyboard and mouse, or KBM for short. Some quite obvious pros here. If you've got a PC, you've almost certainly got these already, so it's no additional spend beyond what you'd need already. And as a result of the universal nature of this setup, you've also got familiarity. Yes, you need to learn the controls of Star Citizen, but these are established and well documented, and overall you're going to be comfortable using the device. But maybe a slightly less obvious pro is actually precision, specifically of the mouse part of this equation. Joysticks, the other major option in the controller sphere, may feel a lot cooler and offer enhanced precision in some areas, but a mouse is arguably the most precise device out there. Just an extension of your hand that you point where you want to go and what you want to shoot at. Just think about all those FPS games that allow crossplay between Xbox, PlayStation and PC, and all those poor console players crying about hacks as they get shot in the head again. And speaking of FPS, for my final pro for the KBM crew, it's going to be practicality. Star Citizen isn't just a spaceship simulator. You switch frequently during a session between flying your ship and running around on foot, and for on-foot control, keyboard and mouse is really hard to beat. So for KBM purists, there's no additional desk space required and no alternating between control setups on the fly. But now for the major downsides, which typically drive people to look at some of the alternatives. And number one is your digital inputs, but it might be better to think of this as digital versus analog. I know I said the mouse is an incredibly accurate device, but unfortunately the keyboard is not. And in a keyboard and mouse setup, your keyboard is going to be doing nearly all of the heavy lifting in terms of thrusters. Forward, back, left and right, strafe and roll are all nestled in your keyboard hand. And these are all on digital inputs, ones and zeros, on or off. You can't easily, without complicated alternate controls and possibly a third hand, go forward at 25% of your max thrust or gradually accelerate or decelerate. Joysticks, on the other hand, allow you to control the acceleration of input, choosing to quickly smash the stick forward to max or slowly graduate it. There are ways to attain more control, like using your speed limiter well, but even this suffers when on a mouse wheel. Now, I personally find it impossible to get my mouse wheel to set the speed limiter perfectly at a stated speed like 100 meters per second. I'll often annoyingly be pinging between 98 and 101. And this precision extends beyond purely flight. The same issue I have with my mouse wheel extends into mining laser control, often having to feather between too high and too low, whereas on my joysticks I have an additional analog scroll wheel that makes finding an exact Goldilocks level much easier. So while keyboard and mouse does have all of the necessary inputs to attain that 6 degrees of freedom flight, it's not like they're that easy to use. You have all the necessary buttons on your device, but it's more that you can't combine them in anything other than simple on-off ways. You can't go forward at 100% while rolling left at 20% and strafing down at 10% power. Whereas with more versatile inputs you can get these types of mixes. None of this is to say that you can't be competitive as a keyboard and mouse player. In both combat and racing, two of the areas of the game that are just objectively the most demanding and measurable, there are players at the top of the game who are playing on keyboard and mouse. However, it is definitely worth understanding the drawbacks of whatever devices that you use. Another thing about keyboard and mouse is that you often have to take your hands off the flight controls to reach some of the buttons. I'm thinking about things like landing gear, entering scanning mode, changing the pips in terms of your power management. Reaching for these buttons will often mean that you're taking your hands off the buttons which are controlling your flight movements. So it can be a little bit tricky sometimes, or you can miss a step when it comes to making adjustments to your ship's systems while also flying. So I did wonder about how best to order this video and where to go next. I ended up deciding to jump straight ahead to the option that most people who delve into joysticks find works for them. HOSAS, or hands-on stick and stick, or just more simply dual stick, where you have a flight joystick in both your left and right hands. Most joysticks will provide you with analog inputs along 3 axes. Forward and back along the X, left to right along the Y, and a twist to provide movement along the Z. So with a pair of sticks, you get a full 6 axes to play with, giving you smooth, precise control for all 6 of the 6 degrees of freedom movements. This level of precision is the key advantage of HOSAS, allowing a pilot to pull off movements at high and low speeds that a keyboard and mouse pilot is going to struggle to match. On top of this, a big advantage is the amount of easy-to-reach controls with most joysticks. They tend to have a huge amount of buttons right under the thumbs and fingers of the user, allowing you to keep your hands on those flight controls without having to lose control of your ship's systems. As I mentioned in the last chapter, the analog controls also extend to aspects like dials that you can assign to things like mining laser power for more precise control there. But probably a key selling point of dual sticks for me is immersion. For me at least, gaming can at times just be an escape from everyday life. And the best RPGs are the ones that make you forget that you're just a person staring at a computer screen, and to a greater or lesser degree, transplant you into that game world. And that feeling of having both your hands locked onto the sticks as you zip along the surface of Daymar in a Gladius really helps to improve the feel of the game. But now for the negatives, and it starts with a really big one: price. Sticks are not cheap to begin with, and to get a HOSAS setup, you've got to buy 2 of them. Obviously, with all of the caveats outlined before in mind, Thrustmaster T16000Ms are probably the most recommended entry-level sticks, and even a duo pack of these runs for north of £100 on Amazon at my last check this morning. When you start to look at more premium manufacturers like the VKBs that I personally use, or if you've just had a small lottery win Virpals, then you are looking at the best part of, if not over £1,000. I'm never going to tell you how to spend your money, but I think it is worth noting that in the world of joysticks, you very much get what you pay for. So keep this in mind, that these are mechanical devices that will wear and tear over time. Plus you will find bells and whistles like extra buttons etc. on the more expensive sticks that you won't on the cheaper models. Some of my org mates would recommend going for a more premium option from the get-go, given the cheaper models will likely wear out quicker. Personally, I would err on the side of caution, and I would just try out a pair of Thrustmasters if you're going down this route, just to confirm it's what you enjoy. If £100 gathers dust on the shelf, it's not great, but it's a lot better than 1,000. One good thing here is that generally speaking, your right stick is more important than your left. Sorry, this might be the other way round for lefties. And what you can always do is slow upgrades over time. Start out with a pair of Thrustmasters, then get a premium right stick, and keep the Thrustmaster on your left, save up a bit more and upgrade the left stick when it's your birthday. Something that's also worth bearing in mind is that the price might not stop at just the sticks themselves. Most sticks come with rubber mountings to reduce slippage on your desktop, but they're not perfect, and the last thing you want is for the stick to be falling over if you make violent movements mid-dogfight. Plus the top of your desk might not be ideal in terms of height and positioning, so a lot of people also opt for mounts, either locking the sticks to the lip of the desk or to their chair. This just adds another chunk of change on top of already high costs. The second issue for me is accessibility. Mapping all the controls is pretty much on you. There are some default setups, and you can always port in some that others have made, but even then you have to learn where everything is. So getting to grips with your joysticks, no pun intended, can take a bit of time, which can put some users off. And finally, I would consider desk real estate, or space, as a bit of a drawback. These aren't exactly small devices, so if you use your computer for other stuff like work, or maybe it's a shared device, then you are going to need somewhere to keep them out of the way. If you've got a dedicated gaming room, #lifegoals, this might not sound like a problem, but if like me, space is a premium commodity for you, it's definitely worth keeping in mind before you add a pair of sticks to your shopping cart. So now let's take a look at a few other options that you might want to consider. And first up here is HOTAS, or hands-on throttle and stick. This is a traditional setup for flight sims, so you might have this lying around if you've done one of them in the past. Here your right hand has a joystick, but your left has a flight throttle, designed to precisely control forward and back motion. Some throttles can get really fancy with split options, allowing you to make good use of speed limitation or control separate elements of thrust and thrust acceleration. Obviously here you benefit from an element of precision, along the axes that you can control, and the same wealth of controls that you would find within HOSAS, since you've got that joystick and a lot of the throttles have additional buttons on them as well. However, while the throttle gives you good analog precision along one axis, you're not going to have enough here for proper stick-off. You can make up for some of this deficiency by binding the other axes to mini controls like the thumbstick you'll find on many joysticks, but the size of the joystick determines the level of precision that you have, so this is definitely a trade-off. And if you are forced to use these extra buttons and sticks for movement, then they're not going to be available for use with other controls. Some of this can be alleviated by adding a set of rudder pedals to the mix, giving you another axis using your feet. But obviously this is additional cost, and it does tie you to a seated position, so not ideal if you're using a sit-stand desk. The setup does still score points for immersion, but I would say that in Star Citizen and other space sims, it's not the same degree as HOSAS, since you will feel a bit disconnected from lacking the full freedom of motion. The downsides of price, accessibility, and real estate are also all similar to HOSAS. They may be offset to some degree if you just happen to have one of these lying at the bottom of a wardrobe from your flight sim heyday. Now, HOSAM, or hands on stick and mouse, is a really interesting if slightly odd one. And honestly, while I think the best setup is the one that works for you, I think it might be on paper the optimal setup for Star Citizen. With HOSAM, you just have that one joystick in your left hand, while your right hand keeps hold of the mouse. And this allows you precise control all over the shop. As we mentioned under keyboard and mouse, there's absolutely nothing wrong with mouse precision. In many ways, it's better than anything else. I'm also going to put price in the pros column here, because you only need one stick rather than the two pieces of additional hardware you'd need with HOTAS or HOSAS. My friend Anorii.hectate has an amazing video covering HOSAM in depth, which I will link in the video description down below. If you happen to have an old Thrustmaster lying around from a flight sim, or you've got a HOTAS setup, I would strongly encourage you to give this a go at least. The key downside to this setup though is the lack of controls. You'll get the benefit of all the extra buttons on the stick in your left hand, but most mice only have the 3 primary inputs, then maybe a few extra side buttons. And that might mean that some of the ancillary controls need to live on your keyboard, leading you to lift your hands off the flight controls to access them. If you love the HOSAM setup, then you could always look at some of the MMO mice, things like the Razer Naga, which have an extra panel of buttons along the side to give you way more inputs. And finally for this video, we've got the ultimate Chris Roberts approved setup of a gamepad, using something like an Xbox or PlayStation controller. And while it is an extra bit of kit, I am comfortable putting price in the pros column here. I picked up my Xbox One controller second hand for about £30, so it's an affordable bit of kit, and there's always second hand ones floating around. Also on the plus side here, you do essentially have dual sticks, providing you with analog controls over all 6 axes, allowing you to make those smooth flight movements. However, as I mentioned when talking about HOTAS, in this situation size does in fact matter, and the tiny sticks on a controller offer nowhere near as much precision as proper joysticks. You are also going to suffer from a lack of controls. The Xbox controller I use from time to time has dual sticks, and then a total of 12 other assignable buttons, and if you've played SC for any length of time, you'll know that this is far shy of what you need. So invariably, you're going to be forced to keep your keyboard within reach to give you full control over your ship and other functions. That being said, I personally get my Xbox controller out once in a while when I just really want to chill. Kick back on the sofa, connect my PC to the TV, wireless keyboard on the armrest for the extra buttons, dog on the other side for the extra warmth. And that way I can just enjoy a few hours of some relatively simple cargo hauling or mining. And I think that is a particularly good point to end on, because while I've outlined what I believe to be the 5 core options in the space, there are endless opportunities for personal customization that mean I will have missed certain setups. And ultimately the quote-unquote best setup for Star Citizen is whatever works best for you on any given day. Personally, I use 3 of these. When I'm feeling a bit lazy and I can't be bothered to connect up my sticks, I just use mouse and keyboard. And I also like to stay current on mouse and keyboard controls for the purposes of making guides. When I want max immersion, I go for my HOSAS, and honestly, I just love how it feels to fly a ship with hands on 2 sticks, the amount of extra control you get over your vehicle. And then when I'm feeling extremely lazy, I go full couch potato with the Xbox controller. I just hope that this video has helped some of you understand some of the jargon a bit better, and to get an idea of what the most common setups are before you launch into more research on this subject. If you would like to chat to anyone, please do hop into our Discord via the link in the video description. Our hardware and tech channel is full of really helpful and far more knowledgeable than me, people who will be happy to give you some advice. If you did find the video useful, I would of course massively appreciate if you hit like and subscribe for more content. I'm going to be holding off any further hardware upgrades in the PC sphere until I've upgraded my bed with a proper orthopedic mattress, but I should be sufficiently mended now to have more regular content rolling out again. So with all that said, thanks for sticking with me, so many stick puns, and I look forward to seeing you next time.